What is up, For Honor family? We have the sketch of the new hero, and I wasn't going to do a video on this, but since there wasn't much of anything else to talk about in For Honor right now, unless you're a fan of the BP Hero Fest execution, so I found myself asking the question, who is she? Let's take a little time to briefly talk about who is the For Honor team looking to draw inspiration from for the new hero. We had Benkei as inspiration for Sohei, we had Guljin as the inspiration for Hatun, so who is the inspiration for the perceived upcoming rapier hero? I'll be straight up with you now. Although I go through a few names here, spoiler alert, none of them check all the boxes for me, but one strikes an incredible resemblance to the poster. I could have missed or be missing information that could make it correlate, or maybe the For Honor story veers off the path that I think they're headed on. But let's jump into some possibilities. First, we'll start with Ana de Mendoza. She was suggested by a fellow family member, saying the For Honor team could possibly use her story for the new hero. When I read into her story, I found out she was a Spanish aristocrat. That fits the potential Spanish roots. She joined a convent after her marriage, but then left it because she was reluctant to steer away from her class privileges. So while she is religious, her other desires were stronger, which would make sense why she would seek out for more. The last thing I want to point out that is interesting but also gives me pause is she wears an eye patch. The hero in the poster does not. But wait, the rumor is she received the eye patch from a fencing incident. That means she would have some familiarity with a rapier. And it would be pretty cool to have a hero helm where you can either have the eye patch in an alternating helm or no eye patch with the regular helm. That's just wishful thinking though. My reasons against Mendoza is while I feel she could lead a group, it doesn't seem like she would be about that pirate life. Mendoza appears to want to run with the rich, not work her way to the riches, if you know what I'm saying. Her running into Coldheart barefoot and struggling seems unlikely. Of course, it could be loosely based on her, because that's what the team does. I just don't see her story as that compelling on the surface, but they could alter it easily to take it up a notch. So trying to stay within Spain, I discovered an elite soldier. Anytime we're talking about elite soldiers being women during the Renaissance period, in a region I'm expecting the hero to be from, and the same gender, you can imagine it caught my interest. And Maria de Estrada did that. According to Hernan Cortez, she was the best female warrior that took part of the conquest. Who is Hernan Cortez? He is a Spanish conquistador who conquered the Aztecs and claimed Mexico on behalf of Spain. When I read that, it got me thinking about the treasure on the Canyon map in A Point. Definitely Aztec, and even has the Aztec calendar on there. The Aztec calendar is believed to depict the history of the cosmos. So with these things being on the map, I was thinking, okay, all right. There could be some ties here since these items are so outwardly visible, but reading the article further, it said that she fought bravely with a sword and buckler. This sword they mentioned could absolutely be her rapier. It then said, she fought with such fury and courage that she exceeded the effort of any man. Those are the types of warriors we want in For Honor. No one wants to pick up their controller or get behind their keyboard and want to use a known timid and scared hero, at least those that follow the story. I'm like, some of y'all might want to, but not me, that's for dang sure. So at this point, I began to get cautiously hopeful of Maria de Estrada being the woman the hero is modeled after. But I couldn't get past the fact that she was a conquistador. And we have Conquistador Vela, who knowingly raided Ocelot's home, destroying and pillaging all they could carry. So that means the treasure is likely from Vela more than anyone else. That doesn't rule out Maria de Estrada as being an inspiration for the new hero. It's just hard to see it as likely at this point with no true ties to Coldheart's lore. So staying within Spain, I thought, could they reference Catalina de Araso? Catalina, or as some knew her as Francisco, fled a convent, later disguised herself as a man, and joined the Spanish colonial army. Then later returned to Spain, where her exploits were immortalized. That's the short version of her story. How does this relate to her being an inspiration to the new hero? Well, Catalina started off in a convent and left it at the age of 15. She didn't want the path her father wanted, which was for her to be a nun. She wanted something more. That in part could explain the lead in to Coldheart's Journal 1, where he talks about her coming in barefoot and in tears. He said he could see a fire burned in ye. He didn't say him or her. And this could be written to hide the identity and story for the upcoming den. You know, they want to save it for that point, since she could have been disguised as a man after she cut her hair. It is also understood that Catalina was a runaway. That would also fit. She didn't want to leave, but she couldn't reach her potential where she was. It is stated she was nearly unbeatable at swordplay and found herself in many duels with rivals. It is clear in parts 2 and 3 of the journal that Cohart is bothered by what he seemed to believe was a mentee. He saw them as family, and the way Araso moved from place to place aligns with her lack of allegiance. When discussing Araso's movement, the article read, "True to her nature, she deserted the Navy in favor of joining the Spanish army." Could they use the leaving of the Navy, aka Cohart's crew, to join forces elsewhere be how they maneuver the story? Could they possibly maneuver the story that way? I don't know. It's just reading into it a little bit, you know? But reading about Catalina's story made me think of the sharp silhouette lore differently, because it does say most were unfamiliar with the woman standing on the shore, but the captain's face told a different story. Since that different story is probably not the survival of Shu Wei that I mentioned in the last video, that's a tear for me. That's definitely a tear for me. It could very well be shock. It could be shock from discovering who he thought was a man, or Francisco, as it relates to Catalina, was actually a woman. So how does this relate to the reward asking for the woman? I'm not entirely sure, but she did work for the Secretary of Spain's king, Philip III. The secretary was impressed by the manners and intelligence of the young boy, so they thought. And as a page, she announced visitors until one of the visitors was her father, and she abandoned her post and never came back. But that's a weak link to no link at all, because that wouldn't explain the dead or alive on the poster. She did finally reveal her true identity as a woman to a priest when she thought she was on her deathbed. She was quoted as saying she had a special inclination to take up arms in defense of the Catholic faith and to be employed in His Majesty's service. There's still no great tie-in to why the Majesty would be offering a 200 steel reward, dead or alive, if there's any tie there. However, her history does align with most of what Cohart's journals and the sharp silhouette lore has stated. So I wanted to keep searching, and I was like, okay, I probably should kind of head out of Spain. So my search finally took me away from Spain and ended up in France, where I read about a savage, absolute savage female duelist. Her name was Julie Dobin. Yes, I said Dobin. Later to be Mademoiselle Maupin. But we're gonna stick with Julie for the rest of this, since that's gonna be just easier for me when I'm talking. So interesting when I thought about it, because we were literally introduced to the new hero's silhouette when she's talking to Dobin, which is not Dobin, but it's still interesting. She had no problem taking on men in duels. She learned to be a duelist when she was younger, and while she had many affairs, including one that she leveraged to get her start in opera when she was 17, there's one instance that happened to make me think a little more. Why can't this be the inspiration for the new hero? She went to a royal ball dressed as a man, and she dared to kiss a famously single noblewoman in full view of the court. No less than 3 of the women suitors challenged Julie to a duel. Astonishingly, Julie simply marched them outside, defeated all 3, and then returned to the party. How savage is that? La Maupin was an elite duelist. It is also possible she could have come across Cohart when she was young, disguised as a man. Once she got what she needed from Cohart, which was the training with the sword, she left. I could absolutely see Julie, I could see Araso, I see any of them doing that with Cohart. I won't go into much more of her story, but you can see how she attacks everything that she wants. She grew up in royalty, but she didn't care to live in that world. She walked her own path and wouldn't hesitate to walk out on any man or woman that she was with, and didn't care how they felt about it. Plus, she could fight. And going back to the sketch and then looking at the sketch of Julie, there's some likeness there. It would completely obliterate the Spanish roots that I was thinking, but I'm not saying they would have to use only Julie's story as background. It could be a combination of Julie Dobin, Maria de Estrada, and even Catalina de Araso. But what we do know is they're going to use someone or something as an inspiration. Do you have any guesses on who she is and who the inspiration might be? Do you believe it's possible one of these women that I mentioned in this video could be it? I do want to thank you for tuning into this video. I appreciate y'all for that, and I always will. Until next time, y'all, I know we're going to have something pop up really soon. I appreciate you. Peace.